As we go through conversations, just call me Chris. I'm honored to be here. As Teresa said, I'm the Animal Advisory Commissioner for District 1. And that's a long title to simply say that there's a group of 14 people appointed by City Council to advise City Council on animal issues throughout the city. So each district has one, which means that each district has their own representation and kind of their own issues. Now, what we're facing in District 1 with animal issues is different than what we're seeing in District 8, which is the Dowdy Ferry, which is where all the dead dogs are being dumped. So we all have to come together as a unit to really decide how to help animals in the city of Dallas, help responsible ownership, how to enforce laws that exist, and it's through education typically that happens. So I always do this, and not just in a group of students, but even in my rescue work. So how many people here have a dog or cat? Okay, so as I ask these questions, keep your hands up. As I ask these questions, if the answer to this is that you do not, put your hand down. Actually, how many of you have a dog or cat?
Hands up.
How many of you have an altered animal? What's that? Meaning they're not spay or neutered. If you got one that's not spay or neutered, put your hand down. How many people here have a dog or cat that always has a collar on? How many of those people who have a collar on does it have a tag? Okay, so this is a good example of understanding what the laws are in the city of Dallas. All of those things are actually, you're breaking a law by not having an animal that's altered, a tag that can be seen by an officer, anything like that. So that's kind of the dialogue today that we're going to have. So I'm going to pass out a few things. I don't have enough for everyone, but these are the laws that pertain to the city of Dallas regarding animals. A lot of people think that there's like a list of 10 things that you can and can't do with animals, and that's not the case. So feel free to flip through these and kind of get an idea of what's going on and how you would like to ask some questions, because we talk about rattlesnakes, we talk about petting zoos, we talk about, you name it as it relates to animals, it's about that. Now, does anybody know the difference between Dallas Animal Services and the SPCA?
Yeah.
What is it?
SPCA is more like it's like a private kind of thing, and the animals is kind of like all around.
True. So Operation Kindness also falls under the same umbrella as SPCA. The SPCA is a closed shelter, so that means that they're privately funded, they're privately owned, and the only animals that can go to a shelter like that are ones that are owned by people who no longer want their animals. So it's an owner-relinquished only shelter. The city shelter is a municipality shelter, and by law, they have to take any animal that is brought to them. Any idea how many animals go through our city system a year? A million? Thank God it's not that high. Anyone?
300,000.
Okay, so the good thing is that you guys think it's a higher number than it is, which is great, because that means that you guys are already conscious of what happens to animals probably when they enter a shelter. Last year we took in 32,000 animals. So you think about that on a daily basis and break that down as to how many animals come in and out of the shelter on a daily basis. Now we have something called the live release rate. The live release rate is a measurement of animals that leave the shelter via adoption, back to their owner, or into a foster home. The other half are euthanized. So in that, we euthanize 18,000 plus animals in the city of Dallas a year. Not because it's something we want to do or it's fun to do, but because a lot of people don't understand how a system like this works. So has anybody ever been to Dallas Animal Services?
I volunteer at SPCA.
Oh, okay.
SPCA.
Nice. A good facility. They're great people over there. Anybody else in the shelter? If you get it, you have. So you saw the new one, right? The one over on Westmoreland. The interesting thing is that shelter is only about 7 years old. And the shelter previous to that was literally about 4 rooms this size that served the entire city of Dallas, a population of 1.3 million people. So at that point, our live release rate was virtually zero. pretty much every animal that went into the shelter was euthanized. And that's, again, not because it's something we want to do or people enjoy doing. It's what do you do with these animals to give them a quality of life and an opportunity, while at the same time having to keep taking dogs in. How many people here believe in a no-kill kind of environment? Okay, and you guys all understand what a no-kill shelter is? A no-kill shelter is a shelter that has a live release rate of 90% or greater, meaning that only 10% of the animals that go through it are euthanized. And those are typically animals that are ill, need some sort of major behavioral training, something like that. So while that is something we would love to see, and what we're trying to work towards, city politics have just changed to where we're probably not going to see a live release shelter for probably about a decade. How many people watch the news? How many people get their news off Facebook? That's where most of you guys get, come on. Has anybody heard about the lady who was mauled to death by the 7 pit bulls? So that is a pretty serious thing. When we get people who start dying because of animals in the city reacts. And so we're getting ready to actually face some major policy change in the government, the local government. And it's going to be interesting and impact everybody throughout the city. How many people's dogs have gotten out by mistake? So what's going to happen now is those dogs are going to be rounded up. They're going to be taken to the shelter. You have 3 days to find them. If you don't find them, they're going to be euthanized. It's not because that's what we want to do, or that the commission that I sit on has worked so hard to avoid. It's what city council wants. So here you've got an advisory board who is telling council one thing, what we need to be doing, but then we've got council who does what they want. So this is where local politics come in. Have you ever written to your city council person and told them what you want, what you don't want? Has anybody ever done that?
Did you write a letter to Scott Griggs last week?
Yeah,
Okay.
What was it about?
problems and solutions.
To what?
Scott's a good guy. He typically listens.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the good thing is that you can have a voice. You don't have to be of voting age to talk to your council person. You know, it's your world that we're moving into, and this is something. If you guys don't want a no-kill, if you want a no-kill shelter, you guys are the ones who are going to have to do that. But you have to start with understanding the basic laws of animals in the city of Dallas and how we can change them, and what we have to build on. So far, what kind of questions does anybody have about anything?
What do you do if you like find a stray dog or an animal? Like, I always see them like near my apartment. It's like 10 a week or something. They're just like around everywhere.
So it's what the question was. What do you do if you find a lost animal? So by law, there are 3 things that you have to do when you find an animal. You can't just keep it and say mine, because that animal could possibly belong to somebody. One, you have to check for a microchip, and that's a scanning device that you can actually use on a dog that gives you a number, and you're registered to that number. So you have to do that. You have to actually make some sort of a valiant effort to attempt to find the owner. You can also, you don't have to take them to Dallas Animal Services, but you do need to call them and tell them. They will give you what's called an A number, which is an intake number. So when you're networking on Nextdoor or Facebook or something to try to find the owner, at least you have that reference number and they're reported with the city. The last is that if there's any type of medical issue going on right at that time, you do have to do something. You can't just let an animal suffer on the streets. And at that point, that's when you take them into Dallas Animal Services, and they'll evaluate the animal and see what they are capable of doing, and then make a outcome decision from there. So it's interesting because Teresa and I met actually when she was working on an art project for my business. My business is also animals. I have 2 pet care facilities, one downtown and one over on Hampton and Emmett, called the Petropolitan. And she and I met on an art project that they came and approached our business about, and we were excited to have that done. But a lot of people, and this is one of the biggest debates, I think, is around animal welfare and ownership, is spay and neutering your pet. Do you guys think it's a law?
Yeah.
You do? How many people think it is a law? Okay. It is a very strong law. You are required in the city of Dallas to alter your animal. If you decide that you don't want to, you are required to have an intact permit. And that is $100 a year and registered with the city, but you have to do one of the two things. We see an overpopulation problem. One of the reasons we have so many animals on the street is because of litters that are eventually just turned out to the street. So that is one of the reasons that came around. And you know, when we have to mandate something like mandatory spay and neuter, we also have to look at the cost of it and how reasonable is it for people to do and things like this. So when we do something like that, like we're also talking about a mandatory microchip program, but when we do something like that, we look at innovative ways to offset the cost. So one of the things that we offer is a low cost or free spay neuter clinic once a month. And that's through grants and partnerships like the SPCA and Big Fix for Big D, and groups like that. So you know, when somebody says that it's a cost factor, you're not going to buy it. And actually, you can get fined $250 every time an officer comes out to your house and your animal is still intact if you don't have one of those two things. So that's one of the biggest laws that people think they don't have to listen to. That also impacts the live release rate at certain points. Like right now, the shelter is full of puppies and kittens because it's that time of year. We'll see it again typically around November. You know, every cage is full of dogs under 6 months old. So that's another reason for that, is for the control of the animals in the city of Dallas. So, who wants a monkey in here? You want a monkey? You want a monkey? So, there are a lot of animals that you can't own in the city limits of Dallas. Monkeys you can, however, I would suggest that you look for a job. You have to get licensed, but I would suggest you look for a job working with monkeys instead of owning one. There's a lot people can do to make a living off their passion, and mine is animals, and you know, I've been doing this now for 20 years. What I would say about that, I've got a very dear friend who is she finds animals for movies and commercials and things like this. She's got a buffalo who can jump through a hoop of fire. Now, how do you know or learn that your buffalo can jump through a hoop of fire? I don't know, but she figured it out. But she gets to play with monkeys at least 3 or 4 times a week. And she plays with them, but she would never want one after that. But there is specific types of licensing that you have to have for specific types of animals. The circus comes into town, and they require a very different type of permit from the city because of the usage of animals. So we look at all these different ways that animals are coming through or into our city or impacting our city, and we're charged with making laws around it. So if you guys were given the opportunity to make some of the laws, what would they be as it pertains to animals?
You know, when we talk about ASPCA, that if we see that animals are going through like domestic violence, I guess, we can't really do anything about it because the owners can't do anything about it and like just be like, hey, give me your dog. So it always really pissed me off because we always see different scenarios where like we know the people, we know what the animals are going through, yet we can't do anything about it. Like we can't step in their house and take their dog, which I wish like there would be something changed about that. So I would change the laws somehow there.
Right now, an animal can only be seized by animal control if it's truly neglect or if there is a court order a judge has to sign off on. That's kind of how the law is written. I too think that we should have some more stringent laws as it relates to animals and domestic violence. 38% of people who are in a domestic violence situation with an animal refuse to get help because they're concerned about their animal. And that is also true for people who are going and trying to get drug or alcohol rehab. They won't go into it because they don't have a place to immediately put their animal and be safe. So those are, when we talk about animals and culture, those are two very big things that we have to start looking at is how do the animal laws impact the human that's involved? Who else? Other laws that you would write if you could?
I have a question.
Sure.
How many dogs can you legally have? Do you know? Or?
So, in 2008, the ordinances were rewritten for the city of Dallas, and at that point, there was not a limit as to the number of animals that you could have. However, that being said, in 2008, they moved forward and said that you could have 4 dogs and 2 cats. So 6 animals total, unless you're a registered rescuer. And at that point, you can actually have more animals because technically you don't own them, you're just caring for them for an interim period of time. So based on what the law says, it's 4 dogs and 2 cats. If you live on a half acre or larger, that number does go up. You're able to have, I think it's 6 dogs and 2 cats, or any combination thereof. So 4 cats and 2 dogs. So under a half acre, 6, over a half acre, 8. And puppies or kittens don't count that number until after they're 6 weeks old. Then they are considered another count or head count in the home for that.
How many hamsters can you have?
How many what?
Hamsters?
Hamsters? I don't think we've ever capped hamsters. I would say don't have more than are reasonably handleable, and that makes your house smell like a kennel.
They don't have hamsters, but a friend of mine has like 100 hamsters.
Is he using them for breeding? Is he selling them?
He's gonna sell them.
Oh, sorry, guys. Okay, so that's a whole nother thing that you bring up. Breeding laws. Breeding laws exist to protect both the animal and actually to ensure that people are actually paying their taxes whenever they do sell an animal. We have the intact animal permit, and so anybody who wants to breed animals in the city is required to have that intact permit. And believe it or not, that's not just cats and dogs. It does go into ferrets, rabbits, and other mammals. And so you're required to have that. And technically, when you sell an animal or breed and then post an animal for sale, you're technically supposed to put your breeder's license number on there so that you can tell you're a reputable breeder. Puppy mills are a huge problem. We all know what puppy mills are. Puppy mills are an environment where animals are bred for profit without care or concern of the animals. So you've got many times where animals have been bred for 5, 6, 7 years to get as many litters out of them as they can, but have never been touched by a person. So they literally live in a cage and do nothing but pump out children and puppies and kittens. And that's one of the reasons that we see such a high number of elderly animals that are brought into the shelters. When a breeder is done with them, they don't just keep them as a pet and love on them and give them a happy home until they die. They relinquish them to a shelter so they can be euthanized, so they can actually then restore their stock. This is why places like Facebook, like Craigslist, like the Green Sheets, like Dallas Morning News and the Back Sheet, if you're gonna buy an animal, you really need to understand where that animal is coming from. You need to know that somebody didn't take it, which is a huge thing. Over 1 million animals are stolen every year and used for either bait dogs or sold online. Right now, there are no laws against selling animals online because you can't track them. There is no cyber law on selling animals, and that's something we're trying to work on in the city of Dallas. We've seen people that have found their dogs on Facebook and want to try to get it back, and then they go to the police and there's nothing that can be done. So these are the laws that really need to be looked at in the future. Yeah, the breeding is a big thing. Why would you breed an animal?
Money.
Money, it's the number one reason. Any other reasons?
Fighting.
Fighting? No, a lot of people will breed for fighting. A lot of people will breed for bait dogs. And a bait dog is simply a dog that's used to train a dog to kill other dogs. And so you've got a bunch of different reasons. Yeah, though, some of the other reasons that you hear that people don't spay or neuter their animals or want to have a litter first is that, well, I want my animal to experience being a mother. Well, animals and people are different. It's a different kind of experience, it's a different kind of love, a different kind of bond. And we know that it's scientifically not necessary for a litter to be born to change somebody's makeup and who they are. Did you have a question? Oh.
This gentleman had a question. Jesus, did you have a question?
So reptiles are, there is no breeding restriction on reptiles. However, there are restrictions on certain types of reptiles that you can actually breed. Anything poisonous, not breeding in the city of Dallas. There's a list, and actually in the ordinances, it talks about reptiles and what you can and can't breed. SPCA did a really great job of doing a bust about 4 years ago. Normally they do puppy mill busts and things like that, or hoarder situations. But they busted something called Worldwide Pet. And it was a warehouse in Arlington. You walked in there and there were over 100,000 animals, mostly exotics, tree frogs, lizards, just everything. It was amazing to see the number of people that we had to pull together to actually keep these animals alive while we were trying to prosecute the gentleman who fled to Canada and is still there and can't be prosecuted until he comes back to the United States, but over 100,000 animals. Now, when you think about that, we talk animals, but let's talk about animals and tax dollars. When you talk about what all that work was done and how much we had to put into that, by the end of it, the city, your taxpayer dollars, our taxpayer dollars, had to be used to do that. And when you do something like that, when we have to go after somebody like that, we take away from our streets, we take away from our schools, we take away from other quality of life issues that we need to be focused on. But that one now has cost us roughly over $2.5 million, and we still haven't been able to prosecute that. So those tax dollars still go to that. So this is where, as a younger voice, when I'm gonna get older and I don't have the energy to fight anymore, it's your tax dollars that are gonna go to unnecessary things because people don't adhere to the law. And so that's going to be a really, really big thing. What else?
Questions?
Why do you think people, citizens don't follow the laws? Like register their dogs and simple stuff.
So I have a couple theories about that. One, I think that a lot of people just don't know what all the laws are. So they're kind of naive to the law, but as any police officer will tell you, just because you didn't know you're breaking the law doesn't mean you're not breaking it. So I think being naive to it, a lot of people don't realize that there are mandatory spay and neuter laws, that it is against the law to tether a dog on a leash in a yard, that these things exist. I think that's part of it. I also think that part of it is that no one will take responsibility in our city for animals. And if a police officer doesn't think it's a big deal, then why should you? If our officers are not enforcing law, and we are relying on animal control to do that, yet animal control has so many issues that they can't enforce those laws that we have in place. If our higher ups don't care, then I think a lot of times citizens think it's okay. It's very unfortunate too. And that's, again, why we're looking at the overhaul of animal laws right now, because we had somebody who was mauled to death.
Right.
Because it wasn't important enough at the time to get those animals off the street.
Angel has one more question.
What are your solutions to all the problems that we're having? Like what do you think we should do?
I think that you guys use your voice. I mean, when you see something that's not right with an animal, or if you've got an opinion about something, call your council person, email me. Teresa's got all my information. I think that being active in education is extremely important. I know I've taught my grandparents a lot about owning animals since I've been involved with it. They're a different generation of people and had a different idea as to what an animal should and shouldn't be. I think that if you look at a piece of property, an animal is a piece of property right now in the city, actually throughout the entire United States, that you need to change that. An animal does not need to be property. It's a sentient being. So those are the laws that you guys, as a younger generation, need to start fighting for now. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, Teresa, I've left a handful of these with you. These are all the ordinances. Go through them. You got any questions about them? Don't hesitate to ask.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
How did you get to this position? How did you become this titled person?
Commissioner?
Yeah, commissioner.
So, well, it's kind of funny because it's like all politics. My council person at the time approached me because they knew I was passionate about animals and I lived in the district. And he told me it would only be about 3 hours a quarter. Right now I spend about 3.5, 4 hours a day being a commissioner. Don't get paid for it. And that's fine, it's a passion. But if you want to be something to council, if you want to be an appointee to any of their boards or commissions, it's a matter of showing them that you can make a difference in your district and that you're passionate about doing it. That you'll carry your voice and their opinion together and bring it to the district and try to find the right solutions that impact everyone.
So you'd say being active in community groups?
Active in community groups, being political, taking a stand. I'm not the most popular person half the time to a lot of people, and that's really okay. I'm not there to be popular for them or to be friends. I am there to state fact and be reasonable and pragmatic about the decisions that need to happen. And so, being political and active is lonely sometimes, but again, it's one of the most impactful things that any of you can do.
Mikey, you had a question?
Yes. What district do we live in?
I'm in District 1, so this district, which includes Oak Cliff, all basically of the old Oak Cliff Conservancy League, so down to Elmwood, into downtown, over a couple blocks this direction, and then pretty close to Cockrell Hill. So it's my district is about 57 square miles. So it's every socioeconomic level of people, every ethnicity that you can think of. It's Oak Cliff, which is great, and I love that because the problems in Oak Cliff are so different than what you see in North Dallas and or even downtown. So I love that I've got a challenge, and I'm up for that challenge. So.
Do you guys have a question? Oh, okay.
I have a question.
Well, there's questions all over the place. Hold on, there's 2 more.
What happens after you're euthanized?
So, good question. Sad story. After any animals are euthanized, they go into a landfill. They go to a dump. They are not what we would do to our animals. They are not cremated. They are actually landfill, which is a whole nother problem about euthanizing animals, is that we're putting carcasses into areas that are seeping into our land. And it's not a happy thing. They have something called the lab at Dallas Animal Shelter, and that's where they actually roll all the animals that are going to get euthanized. They go to the lab. And animals are very interesting in the fact that their sense of smell our dogs are 12,000 times better than yours and mine. So an animal acts differently in a shelter because they can sense and smell what's going on. And quite frankly, I believe half the time they can smell death in there. It's why temperaments change of animals in a shelter. When you see an animal go into the shelter, you can see them become very recluse, withdrawn, sad, depressed, and behaviorally, that makes them unadoptable, which makes them onto the EU list. So keeping your animals safe and healthy and compliant to the law, that's one of the reasons why, is that I would be devastated if one of my dogs accidentally got out and ended up at the shelter, and I learned that was the demise.
Carly had a question. Cruz, you got a question?
In the near future, I kind of want to do something of like what you're doing, because currently at ASPCA, basically what I do is I counsel people and dogs. So, it's really cool because aside from counseling the dogs that have traumatic experiences, I also counsel people. But I kind of like want to make, I guess, like a bigger, more impact. Kind of like what you're doing. But whenever I'm at ASPCA, I feel like it's a small thing. Yeah, I know I mean, like you said, I only want to help them. It's not really towards me or to anybody else.